It would be Troy Allen.
And there are toes.
Which I think she will delegate to me.
We'll call the meeting to order, please. 7:06, is that right? And welcome everyone. Welcome back to the start of the school year. The first item on our agenda is to review and approve the agenda, but we're going to make one change. And I'd like Gary to speak to that, and then we will amend the agenda and vote on it at that point.
We have been working on some revisions to the Miller Driscoll statement of requirements, which is part of the town's capital projects process. We worked on this over the summer. We met earlier this week with Mr. Likely and Ms. Burke and Ken, and we hadn't had time to go back with Sean, spend some more time on it. So I'd like to pull item 4E off tonight's agenda, and we'll come back on the 22nd with that.
Okay. Do we do a motion to that effect, please?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the Miller Driscoll construction and renovation project statement of requirements will move to our next meeting. The agenda having been amended, a motion to review and approve the agenda for September 8th, 2011.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. This is the opportunity for comments from the public. It is our bylaws allow us to listen. We don't engage in back and forth conversation, but we encourage anybody to come speak at a board meeting at any time. So anyone here from the public that would like to address the board? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. Consent agenda. The minutes of June 23rd and recommended personnel changes. A motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the consent agenda has been approved. Reports and recognition. I do not have a board chair's report, other than the fact that obviously Gil Bray is not here this evening. Superintendent's report.
Good evening. I have several items. I'd like to talk a little bit about the summer of 2011 and some of the things that were happening in the district during the summer months. Secondly, I'd like to talk about briefly about the opening of the school year. And third, to talk about a program that we're very proud of, the Best Buddies program. It's a very brief item. With regards to the summer, there was each summer we spend time in curriculum work. This summer, staff in the public schools spent a total of about 475 people days working on summer curriculum, and another 26 staff members took advantage of some professional development programs that we were able to support through the generosity of the Wilton Education Foundation. What our practice is, we received a lot of the paperwork summarizing the work that was done this summer on the projects and the staff development work, and it's our practice to come back once we've assembled this information and share it with the board. So we'll have that by the end of the month, early October, pull that together for the board. In terms of staff training in technology, Matt Hepfer, a very capable tech director, reports that 75 teachers took advantage of the Summer Tech Institute training. There were several courses. Again, I think the board has seen some of these. One of the courses was on Web 2.0, another on integration of 21st century skills into the classroom. The third was getting to know Windows 7 in the operating system that we have been implementing in the system. And there were a couple of trainings on Edline, a beginning course on Edline, a more advanced users course on using the communications device, the platform that we've been using, Edline. Second part of the summer, important part of the summer, was that we again had a very successful extended school year program. This program, as the board knows, serves some of our most challenged learners who, as part of their individualized program require additional support in the summertime. We had approximately 178 students enrolled in this program. And I'd like to thank Ann and her staff, and Fred Repsinski, Dr. Fred, who runs the summer program, Heidi Carlin, Assistant Director, and Patty Terranova, and the terrific staff who worked with students. And this program is an intensive program for those kids, but I really think it pays. We see lots of evidence of the dividends it pays. But the side of it that's a little challenging is I think they finished, Ann, when? August 12th, so it makes for a very short, and they're back the next week for various training programs, so it was a short summer for them, but it was a great program again this summer. In terms of staff hiring tonight, one of the great parts of this first meeting is that we get a chance to introduce some of our newest colleagues, and we had this summer 11 teachers that were hired, 9 of whom were classroom teachers. About 4 of the 11 were half-time or less, so there were some people who were working very part-time, and there were 2 guidance counselors in this 11 as well. We have 1 new assistant principal at the high school we'll introduce in a moment. We hired on the paraprofessional side, because of retirements and or resignations, we hired 4 paraprofessionals, 2 at halftime and 2 at 1.0. And I think they're still working on some of those issues with the paras. Another, I think, important human resource event or project this summer, something hats off to Ellen, and with help from Matt, who automated our application system. So now all of our employment applications are online, and it really will, I think, go a long way to make this process more efficient and get rid of a lot of paper. And we're, as of September 1st, we were totally automated in terms of this process. So thank you, Ellen, for your work on that. In terms of the opening of school, we will come back to the board formally with an enrollment report. At this point, it appears that our enrollment numbers are total for the district are about 27 students greater than we projected in the for the 13 grades. Biggest variance is at Cider Mill, where there are about 27 more than we projected, 27 students. Middlebrook is about 12 over projection, Miller Driscoll about pretty much on target, and the high school, I think, was down about 13. The cautionary note I would give on that is, according to, we met with the principals this morning, is that there are still we're still seeing withdrawals, and you know, 2 kids will come in, and then 2 kids might withdraw as families come into the community and leave the community. So these numbers are still a bit fluid. The preschool enrollment at this time is about 47. We have 35 students with special needs and 12 what we're called typical learners. My understanding is that the registration day for the typical students was during the sabbatical we had, thanks to Irene, and so that we may see some additional enrollments of typical peers in the program. Another part of every opening year is transportation, and our student transportation record for the first few days we feel has been pretty effective in the morning. We've had some challenges in the afternoons, and I think there are a lot of reasons for our challenges. The rain, certainly, the heavy rains were not helpful, and we're working through some of the other adjustments that are part of every opening year. And we ask that parents have patience with us as we work through these challenges with student transportation. But hats off to Mary Channing for the extraordinary effort, commitment, hard work she's put in all summer in trying to make these routes efficient. And again, there's a startup period that we're working our way through. In terms of the facilities work that has been done, that was helped us towards a good opening day. The art wing at the high school, as the board knows, The art rooms were stripped of furniture and fixtures, had all thoroughly cleaned, the rooms painted, and most importantly, new sinks, traps, and drains installed in rooms that had been very in need of this kind of work for many years. We completed security camera installation at the high school, and some training was conducted. A World Language Lab, although there was a delay in some of the equipment and furniture until about August 13th or so, Sean and his staff and Matt were able to complete this project well before opening day. So we now have a very functional state language lab on the third floor. We had one that was in pretty good shape, and now this second one will enable us to have full utilization by classes as they need it. Cider Mill, we worked on reinsulating some of the duct work. This was completed by the end of August, and then some repair on the HVAC in the former Peach Corps at Miller Driscoll. So those were some of the facilities projects. Hurricane Irene, the summer is the story of Hurricane Irene to some degree. Considering the huge impact that this storm had on our community, we feel the schools weathered the storm reasonably well. Major exception was at Middlebrook, where again we had major flooding in the courtyard adjacent to the cafeteria and the library media center. And we had about 3 inches of water that came into those facilities after they'd been all set up and cleaned and ready for opening day, along with the 10 classrooms in the surrounding areas. Once again, Sean and his crew went to the whip and really got it all cleaned up, aired out appropriately, and it was remarkable how they got the rooms back in order fairly quickly. So, some of you I know had seen the facility, and it was hard to believe that it had gone through the flooding that we did. We also had power outage for several days at Miller Driscoll. As the public knows, board knows, we used a portion of Miller Driscoll for an emergency shelter for a couple days, so that all had to be broken down and cleaned up. But again, we'd like to thank Sean and his crew, custodial and maintenance group, for all they did to lead us to a smooth opening. I also think that as we went around, Tim and Ellen and I went to every school on opening day and many classrooms throughout the district, and we saw again purposeful work, a calm atmosphere, and I think that was a result of great planning from principals and her staff to ensure that kind of an opening. So we think all things considered, we're off to a good start. Finally, this is, I wanted to talk to you about a program at the high school. Many of you are aware of it, called Best Buddies. It's a program that pairs youngsters with learning disabilities with some of their typical classmates in the high school. These buddies, they're called buddies, interact with each other throughout the year. There are functions they go to where they have pizza dinners and a movie night, or a variety of things during the course of the year where they interact. I think the kids who participate in this as the buddies, as the mentor buddies, really realize that they're trying to also further a climate of respect and acceptance of all kids, even those who have some very challenging learning issues. Some representatives of this Best Buddies program attended an international leadership conference, and the Best Buddy chapter here at the high school, Taylor Gillespie, summed it up by saying, "I always thought Best Buddies was about friendship, and it is, but it's so much more. This leadership conference reminded me why I'm passionate about this organization and inspired me to include, accept, and celebrate everyone around me. I feel more than ready to take on the challenges of being the high school chapter president and make our chapter the best it can be." So again, it's something Ann has supported, and really I think is another example of our kids reaching out and trying to make our schools more accepting places for all kids. And that, as you know, hasn't always been the case with youngsters that have had the kinds of challenges that some of our kids have. So again, finally, I think we had a good opening, and I'm pleased tonight in a moment to hear the principals welcome our new staff who are here tonight with us.
Yeah, thank you. But I just want to say that I think it's remarkable when in doing enrollment projections with, in excess of 4,000 kids that we ended up, within 27, and I think it was 4,300 or close to that. I think that's quite remarkable. And I also, just on behalf of the board, would like to thank the staff for the work that they've done in getting the schools ready under difficult circumstances, and Sean and his crew and everybody else. Not the way we wanted to start school, but on behalf of the board, we thank everybody for what they did. Committee reports, anyone?
Yes. At the June meeting, we approved an evaluation document for legal services. And given the pushback at the beginning of school, we're going to hold off for another probably 2 weeks before we send that document to the board and to the administrators. So that'll probably be coming the week of September 22nd. And we'd ask your cooperation by completing it to the best of your ability and getting it back to Bruce or I so that we can collate the results and move forward on that project.
Okay. Are you sending it out with a sort of implied deadline of when to get it back? With a
We haven't
specific
drafted the
date?
cover letter yet.
Yeah,
That's the
I
next
think
step.
Specificity there would be helpful.
Right.
Okay. Anyone else? Committee report?
Dick, I wanted to make a comment on Gary's comment, actually a request. I realize we're only 3 days into it, but as soon as you get the final number, we'd like to see distribution of students.
On enrollment, sure.
Yeah, I know you showed us the variances, but when things settle down a touch.
Yeah. Our traditional date is, I think, is October 1 is the date that we key off of when things, I think, have settled down.
But I think we can give some preliminary.
Yeah.
The October 1's our official census date, but there is a certain fluidity the first week or so, and when we get that, and I think Tim was working today with the principals on some of the distribution, so you can see how it shakes out.
I'm really excited about being the board's representative to the Wilton Education Foundation. As we all know, they did an amazing job last year and gave us an opportunity to do things that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. Their first meeting this coming year is next week, and I know there's a tremendous amount of excitement in getting ready for the year. So I encourage anybody that's interested in participating to contact either myself or somebody on WEF and try to get involved. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. Now the moment that we look forward to every year in welcoming our new staff. Ellen, do you have a few remarks that you'd like to make?
Just a comment or two. We have a group of 12 new hires, as Gary said, 1 administrator and 11 teachers. Most of them come from the Connecticut area, but we have a couple of people from New York and 1 from Maryland who relocated to Connecticut recently, so we're happy to have her here. And the principals are going to talk about this group. They are very, very talented and bring great experience. So Julia, we'll start with you and then Tim. We only have hires in 2 schools this year, so because of our enrollment changes. So Julia will introduce her new staff.
Okay, and then once they're all introduced, we'll take 10 or 15 minutes and for an opportunity to kind of socialize.
I brought in Becky.
2 steps back.
Would you tell us your philosophy of education and why?
You're first. We're almost in alphabetical order. It's my pleasure to introduce the new class of staff members at Middlebrook School. Kristen Darish is our new 6th grade math teacher on 6 Yellow. Not only is Kristen certified in math, she also is certified as a special education teacher, and that is a wonderful combination. Kristen recently moved to Connecticut from New York, where she had several years of successful experience teaching math to 6th and 7th grade students in White Plains City School District and the Bedford Central School District. Kristen's interest in the whole child was apparent from the moment she first walked in the door. So welcome, Kristen.
Thank you.
And Melissa is our art teacher. She's a .3 part-time art teacher at Middlebrook. And when we interviewed Melissa, when you interview art teachers, it's different because not only do you talk to them, but you look at the portfolio of the artwork that they've inspired in their students and they have done themselves. And Melissa's was most impressive. Not only is Melissa certified in art, she is also trained to work as a teacher and a consultant for the revolutionary Linda Mood Bell reading program in Darien. This is Melissa's first teaching experience, and we are fortunate that she's beginning her teaching career with us at Middlebrook. And finally, we have Natasha Rasmussen is our new special education teacher at Middlebrook. Not only is Natasha certified in special education, she also is certified in teaching English to speakers of other languages, which is the TESOL certification. Natasha has experience working with children in various capacities at the American School in Japan, the International School in Amsterdam, the Ideal English Academy at Sacred Heart Convent School in Thailand, and the European School in Costa Rica. We are delighted that Natasha decided to move to Connecticut to begin her formal teaching career. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Well, we welcome all of you. Delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
Bob? Whoa. Yeah, the gang is here.
We had quite a hiring class this year. High school, so.
We were busy.
Everyone? Well, thank you for the opportunity to introduce our new staff tonight. I'll begin with Mr. Richard Sanzo, who is our assistant principal. Rich comes to us from a neighboring school district. He was the associate dean and a math teacher, and has really established a great working relationship already with the students. He works with freshmen and sophomores and all of our students, and we're proud to have him here. Rich?
Thank you, Bob.
And I'm going to go in the order that I wrote this up. Let me get the batting order. Ms. Kathleen Curcio-Polillo is filling a .4 Spanish vacancy in our school. She comes to us after a truly illustrious teaching career at White Plains High School, and we welcome her expertise and her talent in the World Language Department. Thank you.
Thrilled to be here.
Mr. Chris McCaffrey down at the end is in our English department, one of our two new teachers. He comes to us from Danbury High School, and interestingly was an attorney for, I believe, 8 years before coming to the teaching craft. So he's looking forward to giving something back to our students, and we're proud to have him here. Next in order is Mr. Thomas Hahn, the next member of the English department. He taught for Nanawag at 3 years, and he was known for two things there: a true student advocate and very, very passionate, a true passion for literature. True literature person. Thank you. Okay. Ms. Teresa Soroka is the latest addition to the science department. She comes from the Metropolitan Business Academy in New Haven, Connecticut, where she was a biology and integrated science teacher. Welcome. Next we have Mr. Rich Gabbard, also joining the science department as a .5 science teacher, and he is a highly experienced teacher who comes to us from the Foote School in New Haven, Connecticut. Okay. In absentia, Meredith Walker, some of you may know her, is a .4 theater arts teacher. She directed Almost Maine at the high school recently. She is an alumna of Wilton High School, and we're very proud to have her. She had a professional engagement tonight, but she looks forward to meeting the board members. Mr. Daniel Katz, we have two new counselors, school counselors. Mr. Daniel Katz is here, one of our school counselors, and he recently earned a master's degree, summa cum laude, from Fairfield University, and comes to us via Norwalk. Had a very successful long-term substitute experience, and I must say, based on my observations in the counseling office, really establishing himself with the students and reaching out to students. I saw him out working the hallways today, which was always good to see, and he is being very well received thus far under Debbie Marino's leadership. And finally, we have Ms. Pamela Scott here. Ellen alluded to the idea that we conducted a few long-distance searches. She comes from the state of Maryland. She was not only a very successful school counselor in Maryland at high school, but also a department chair. So she brings leadership ability. And once again, my observation in Counselor Rowe is that these students are in very good hands in the college processing piece, and also student support, social emotional learning, and we welcome you as well. I think that good for everybody, right? All covered? That's what you did. Welcome to Wilton High School.
Thank you, Bob. And on behalf of the board, thank you and welcome to Wilton.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're just going to take a break for 10 or 15 minutes and get to chat a little bit with each of you. And
Thank you.
Hi, good. How's the building now that they're There is.
Students came back with a lot of good energy. I think everybody's hitting the ground running and a lot of excitement.
Didn't lose a gym teacher either, right?
I know. I'm having the kids home for 5 days.
I'll let you meet the
Thanks for Mother's Day. And there's food. Oh, yeah.
See you again. Welcome to my old Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know, it's
Remember your name and
Thank you very much.
Hi, how are you?
You watched it in my office a couple days ago. Talking about what I'm a Packers
First and second days of our scheduled spring vacation would become school days, and so on, if we were to have an unbelievable year. The thing about it that we're taking, and again, it's highly speculative, and is that if you look at the 10-year average of snow days that we've had, weather closures, it averages what, Tim, about two days a year, 2 to 2.5 days a year. So we think we're in fairly, that last year, our hope is that all of us hope that last year was aberrational, and that we won't see this kind of winter again. So we feel that this proposal will be understandable. It was certainly one that served us well last year, and we put it forward for your conversation and reflection, and happy to respond to any questions you might have about the proposed revision.
It's very logical to me, and I think that the parents in town will appreciate the fact that you are taking this step at this point in time so that they know earlier rather than later.
What's the latest that you can recall that we've had to have a snow day? Somewhere in...
The latest, in my experience, and I don't think Wilton had one, but in New Canaan one year, We had them on April 1st, which was wildly aberrational, and it was because trees had fallen. It was one of those
Like an ice storm.
huge storm, and we lost some trees. The snow melted, by 11 o'clock or something, but it was enough to take down some trees. So usually by March we're done, some point in March.
If the average is maybe 2 snow days, might it be possible to consider going forward with this game plan and looking at the first 3 days as the logical step forward, and if we look like we're getting into a nasty winter, then come back and revisit the April date, so that folks can start to make plans, but know that they might be making them at risk.
Yeah, I think, I tend to agree with you. I think it's important that, we don't know what it's going to be.
Right.
And probably, predictably, we won't need that April vacation. But I think parents ought to know that it's a possibility, and perhaps just presume that some of that April vacation in terms of their planning isn't going to be there, and as it gets later into the school year, we'll have a better sense. But
To that point, if I may, maybe we should suggest we put the schedule up on the website
Oh,
now, just for preparation.
Exactly.
So it's clear. One question that I had, and I agree it's logical, and you really have nowhere to go, and you kind of had that built in anyway, moving the days until to the end of June, or at least to the 20th. My question is, I thought when we monkeyed around with the calendar before, we moved some professional development days around.
That's
And my
accurate.
question to you is, if we did get into that, I guess, is it the 4th day, when we start peeling away from April, that we might consider moving one of those professional development days?
We talked about that, and Tim, help me on this one. One of the February 17th date is one, I think, where we have,
Well, there were 2 considerations
Paid.
that make things different than last year, and that is the professional development days have been piggybacked on long weekends and/or vacations. So you see the 17th of January, the 13th of January now is a 4-day weekend. And then the 17th of February piggybacks to the February break. And of course, the vulnerability there is those days could be snow days. Last year, we had a March date that became part of this sequencing. And this year, we didn't have that flexibility. I think I hit the points that we discussed. I'm not sure if I left anything out.
Yeah, it looks to me like the professional development days are too early in the snow season for us to be able to play with them.
And then attached to the vacations gets into some planning considerations for families as well.
What impact does shortening the school year by 1 day have on our staff's work year?
They still have to fulfill the number of workdays in their contract.
right,
Which is what, 187?
187.
Staff,
Sorry.
certified staff's 187.
Okay.
And that reminds me also of the point I did miss as it relates to the movement of professional development days. Ellen and I had talked at great length about the complexity of extending the teacher work year and expectations into that last week in June. So, obviously moving if we get to a 3 snow day scenario, and teachers will have to have their mandated 187-day year, it will go into that following week. But professional development days in January and February would have impacted that as well. It gets very complex when you get into that last week in June for a whole variety of reasons. So we're trying to minimize that impact and looking at April.
Parents hear a lot about state mandated 180 days. What happens if we just do 179? I mean, do they come down and throw us in jail?
The
They throw
superintendent gets
board
on
in
the
jail for a
audit
week?
list of the State Department.
Don't even go there, Bruce. I
Good
don't
que-
want
They
bread and water.
can
It's a fair
pull
question.
funds out. I called, I didn't call the Commissioner's office, but I did call the CAPS, the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents Executive Director, and we talked about this. And one of the things that our experience has been in the past with the state is we back with the H1N1, and where some and back as recently as 2 years ago when they had those tornadoes in Darien and Westport, and where schools were closed for a week. And they went to the commissioner and asked for a waiver and were told no. The Superintendent's Association said the way what would have to happen is that were we to have a horrible winter on top of this hurricane, is that the legislature would have to consider a one-time exemption for districts. But he was not optimistic about even that happening. So if to your question, if we went to one less day, there's potential the state could penalize us for some of the funding that we receive, and that's how they put some teeth into it. I don't know if there are other things they can do. I suspect there are audit lists and all sorts of things that if they chose to could do, but the funding is where they really can exert a little bit of a price on.
Approximately, how much do we get in funding?
The town gets about $1.5 million per year in the education cost sharing grant.
Right.
And are we allowed to
You're
have
not
school
proposing
on
putting that in jeopardy.
Saturday?
No,
No,
you're
just
not allowed to
putting the
have,
information out there.
you're not allowed to have school on Saturday, and so that you don't have a lot of options to pursue. The interesting thing about the law in Connecticut, as opposed to other states, is that if you have school, in some states your funding from the state comes on the basis of student attendance. In California, I know we used to ask parents in the districts I worked in if they are taking their kids skiing or something, that they would pay us what the state would take away from the district. So we would ask parents to write a $50 check for each day that they had taken a kid out for reasons that had nothing to do with illness. In
See, that's
Connecticut,
pay to ski instead of pay to play.
in Connecticut,
I kinda like
That
that.
is
in Connecticut, they don't, and I think what happens when you have when you eat into vacations is some people, and it happens even in non-vacation time. If people are going to go, sometimes they'll go, and they wave to you on the way to the airport. So that what you see is you see more of that happening at the early levels of schooling, and then as you get up into the high school where you have a lot of kids in athletics, you don't see as much absenteeism when you have when you move into vacation week.
I find it intriguing, though, that we could be in a scenario where the governor declares a state of emergency, yet we've then been put in a bind that the state's not willing to deal with. So we could conceivably be in that scenario. It sounds to me like the legislature would have to step in and make some sort of consideration, because we also, as I understand it, have a state mandated hard stop at the end of June. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
So that'll be interesting.
But
See
again,
what they do.
I do think, to go back to your original point, I think it's important that parents understand that April vacation may be in jeopardy.
absolutely.
So, I mean, it's...
Yeah, but not necessarily put it on the table tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, what
That
the
is-
thought was that we wanted to do this and then bring it back for approval on the 22nd. So if you think of other questions in the meantime, let Gil know, and we'll respond to you as best we can.
Can we put it on the consent agenda?
I'd be
I think-
comfortable if we were approving the first 3 days, but I'd like to kind of see how the winter plays out before we step up to those last two.
And I'd like to not let this one die, since it's so early in the season. Maybe we could push one of those professional days out to March. I mean, if you look at it now, we're starting the school year off with 5 snow days. I mean, that's basically what we're doing.
The February 17th one, maybe?
You push that out a month, and then that would give us the flexibility to push that out in the last week of June if we had to.
So you're saying you pick up an extra day by moving that professional development day?
Well, the odds are pretty good. We'll get 3 or 4 snow days, and that 4th snow day will eat away from people's vacation that are gone in April. And my suggestion would be that if we push that, whichever one you want to push out, into March, then we'd have a good idea if we were going into a 4th snow day to push it into June. And I guess it doesn't inconvenience anyone because they got to be here anyway, right? Again, I don't know what speakers you have, I mean,
Yeah, that-
you know.
Yeah.
The building base, it's easier to do,
Right.
and I fully understand your point.
Mhm.
The ones where you have arranged speakers and so on is more challenging, so.
Right.
Why don't we'll look at that, let's bring back, we'll look at this and give you a document and then another draft and see what that looks like, were we to do that, if that's the direction that you would like us to pursue.
I mean, I'm fine with it on the consent agenda, but if we want to have it as a discuss and approve, that's fine too.
For a second.
I think your point is well
I think we
taken,
should
that we're
discuss.
more likely to have snow on February 17th than we are on the 29th
Right,
of March. The only consideration in March that I know of is that the entire month of March is testing window.
That's right.
Right.
yeah. You know, that we do lose some, and you know, part of it too is our thinking as a staff was that we wanted to put professional days earlier in the year to try, and so,
Have an impact.
Yeah, I fully understand that. I mean, I'm just, maybe we take another look at it just because
Okay.
we're starting out the year with 5, in essence, snow days already.
Mhm.
And we'd probably be considering this if we were in that
Right.
situation in February.
okay.
Okay, so this will be back on the agenda
Right.
for the 28th or 22nd. All right, policy and regulation for free lunches, review and discuss.
The policy 3542.5 deals with free and reduced lunches. And as we, Molly had, I think, a very good idea as she kind of honchos a lot of the preparation for the work on policy revision, is that each year, what we found ourselves doing is coming back to the board to, again, review and approve a policy, because the criteria, the guidelines had changed for free qualifications for free and reduced lunch. And so what we're proposing, and this is again on for a first read, is we're proposing to do two things, really. One is that we would be eliminating the regulations, that what we've done each year is as the regulations change and the qualification levels change, we had to come back to the board. So what our thought is that we recommend modifying the policy to say, I mean, we follow the law. I mean, it's to say that as the law changes, we will follow the law, and that would keep us, it would be, I think, more efficient to not have to bring it back each year for approval. And the criteria are, as I said, are set by the feds and are published on state websites, and so we see this as kind of a streamlining, simplification of a policy that we've brought back each year for your approval as the numbers have changed. So I don't know if there's any additional.
You didn't need me at all.
So this guideline that's in here on page 15 is mandated to us anyway? And what you're saying is that we change something that's mandated to us and just change the verbiage to refer to.
Right, to refer to the law.
Actually,
Exactly.
the first sentence of the policy already said that we would provide free lunch to families whose income falls within the current criteria. And then all we did on the regulation before was lay out what that criteria was. But we always follow the current criteria because you have to.
Yeah, the only thing that I saw relative to that is it might be nice to provide some direction, additional direction, beyond established by the Secretary of Agriculture, to give folks that are looking for some information, as opposed to having to come to you to understand what the criteria is, give them some direction so that they can go find that
It's on the state
information.
Everything's on the state.
If we
Yeah.
just add something in there so that they can,
And we do communicate
Yeah.
with.
maybe one tab in on the state, you can just, instead of saying go to the state website, go to the something dot state website.
And we do communicate with families that are on, anybody who was on free or reduced lunch at the end of one year, we communicate with them and send them a new application for the following year. We work with the guidance counselors at each of the schools to identify students who might qualify. The state sends us a list of people who are on food stamps or other assistance who automatically qualify. So there are many many ways to get to people.
How many students approximately did we have last year, and how many do we think we'll have this year?
We've got roughly about 70.
Same as last year?
Yeah, about the same as we ended up with last year. Typically, that number does grow during the year, but that's right around where we're tracking right now.
I have just one question, Ken, in the second underlined paragraph, where it says, shall develop and send to the parent or guardian. Having parent in the singular, I think it should be parent apostrophe S in there, because otherwise it puts us in the position of designating one parent or the other in the singular.
It wouldn't be apostrophe S, would it?
Not apostrophe,
Parentheses, we know what you meant, yeah. We
parentheses, okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Yes, the parents or guardians.
parentheses.
Yeah.
Yeah, these two paragraphs that are underlined were simply moved up from the regulation as they were
Yeah,
already
okay,
worded.
but it's
Yeah,
a
we can
small
make that
technicality,
change.
but.
The suggestion, Bruce, I think made the suggestion, are you, I don't know, I didn't hear any other conversation about that. Were you suggesting that we just put, like, after the sentence on the criteria in the first sentence, in a parens, just the www?
Yeah, some portion of the website, other than the homepage for the state of Connecticut, that gives them a little bit of guidance. It can't go right down to the page, because the state of Connecticut, if we do that, it's gonna change the page.
Yeah, that's true.
So we've gotta give them, half the roadmap.
It's not an easy website to
Okay.
navigate.
No.
No.
Any other questions or suggestions?
Good idea, Molly.
Yep.
Excellent idea.
Can we put this on consent agenda?
Sure.
Yep. Is that all right with everybody if it's
Fine with me.
on the consent agenda for
Yes.
the next meeting?
I think it's great.
Barbara, that's on? Okay, good. Done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that-
The time where we had, Molly, you gave them revised.
Is there a revised?
Yeah,
number?
we've done some, Molly's been working with us in terms of revising the timeline to include the presentations that we're going to be providing, or giving to the board during the fall, so.
Okay.
There's still other things, this is obviously a living document that gets modified as we go on, but just so you can see.
And it includes a November 22nd meeting, so
And it
there are
includes,
enough
thank
of
you,
us
thank
Yes.
you.
to make a quorum.
Yeah, we had initially, we didn't have a second meeting, our Thursday in that month falls on Thanksgiving. And so what we've done in past years is we've held a meeting earlier that week. So we're putting a meeting back on the 22nd. I think you had checked with people, the board had, we were able to get a quorum for the meeting. And it's early enough, it's not a Wednesday, which is a non-starter that week for lots of reasons, or obvious.
Okay, any other additions to the timeline?
I just had one question.
Sure.
Gary, you referenced the need for that because you had reports that you wanted to present to the board.
Well, that, and I think the other thing, Ms. Sachs, was that we were, in looking at the policies that we need to go through, we tried to, we have some big policies that the board's going to need to consider. And our experience has been, and you've seen it over the years too, is that once we get into the January period, you get into budget season, or it becomes increasingly difficult to do the budget or the policy work. So we were trying to bring forward policies that by law and by necessity we need to update, which is why we needed that additional meeting.
Do you know?
It also spread out the reports, and I know
Right,
in past
right.
years,
Yeah.
I
Keep
think
it balanced, yeah.
a good suggestion you've made is try to balance it and not have too many reports on one night.
Is it possible to get a schedule of the policies we're gonna have to review this year?
Yes, we can do that.
Put that forth so we can have
Yeah,
time
I was
to go through.
just going to ask, when do you think the bullying policy, which we have to completely redo, will fall on the agenda?
One of my favorite job description lines are other duties as assigned and on other people's job description. And Mr. Canty has that on his, it's actually the first item on his job description.
Other duties as
That's
Yeah,
described.
and so we, and all kidding aside, we spent a lot of time, as the board knows, I think, with Dr. Joanne Freiberg, who's the state Department of Education expert in this area. And we spent our retreat this summer, a big portion of our retreat, working with her on that. And Tim has been working on the policy. We will have something for you on the 22nd is when we'll bring that forward.
22nd meeting, the next meeting.
Yeah, the next meeting. So that's when we felt that we wanted to, and most districts are in the same place we are with that. The legislation, or there's been a lot of interpretation work over the summer done and lawyers looking at it. And so we think we have a good policy for you to look at on the 22nd.
Would it be possible to get the schedule of other policies?
Yes,
that we'll
yeah,
look at?
yeah, that's,
Okay, anything else?
we'll just put that in the timeline, we'll just work it into, if that's okay.
And finally, another opportunity for public comment. Anyone here wish to say anything to address the board? No? All right. What? You just seem to be smiling.
Yeah, you know your way.
One of the things I did mention, just as a quick aside, that I didn't mention in my report was the fact that we're, I think, really fortunate to have 3 very capable people who are going to be filling some seats on the board in December. And so they have been really working to get up to speed and attending meetings. And I was remiss in not mentioning them, so we appreciate their willingness to serve and look forward to having them join us.
Good. All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned at 8:15. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It was a incredible.
Have a good trip.